She's an award-winning writer, a hunting guide, archery and rifle instructor, keynote speaker, and all-around outdoors woman who encourages you to get outside, hunt, fish, shoot, and savor all that life has to offer. And now, here's your host, Mia Anstine.
Well, hey, hi, hello, you guys. I'm so happy to be visiting with you today. Today, I'm actually super excited to have two friends on the show, and we're going to be visiting about a lot of some fun things and some very interesting things and a lot of issues that are going on in the country and maybe beyond. I don't know. But without further ado, I want to welcome Brian, Lynn, and Naomi Yates from the Sportsmen's Alliance. And Brian and I have worked together in the past at the Professional Outdoor Media Association, which I've mentioned on many episodes, but we've visited with writers, photographers, and outdoor media about how to talk about hunting. And Naomi and I have visited at the Capitol and worked on a lot of protecting the hunting issues from anti-hunters. So without further ado, if the two of you would kind of give some introductions and let us know who you are and what you do with the Sportsmen's Alliance.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us on. It's can't believe I haven't been on before. So it's great to be here. I'm Brian Lynn. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Communications. I've been with the Sportsmen's Alliance for, I guess it's been 9 years. I think it's 9 years this October. So I don't know where the last 9-10 years have gone, but it's gone fast. It's a busy cycle, but so I handle all the outward facing communications, work with Naomi. You know, she works on the social media and does writing and stuff. I'll let her introduce herself. But we make up the marketing department. So pretty much everything you see that's outward facing goes through us. And then I also work on some internal stuff, grants, and our textbook for conservation science curriculum. And pretty much anything written or spoken at some point goes through us.
Yeah. So I'm Naomi Hersch. I haven't been with Sportsmen's Alliance very long, but I've been following them for a really long time. So I'm really excited to be here. I am the Associate Director of Communications, working mostly with Brian and with our whole crew to get our message out there further, like he said. Really happy to be here.
Very cool. And so, Naomi, you have a new name. So do we have some news that I missed maybe when I haven't been on social media?
Yeah. In fact, it's kind of funny. Usually I stumble over it. That's the first smooth transition I've had. So I got married at the end of May. So yeah, Naomi Hersch.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, congratulations. And I'll try to remember to say the correct name in the future.
Either one works.
This summer, whether at the range or in the field, WSI Sports Hypertech bamboo tanks, tees, and leggings will have you covered. Visit WSISports.com to support the show and use the affiliate code MACO10 for 10% off your purchase. All products are proudly made in the USA. WSI is bringing back pride in America-made clothing. Again, that code is MACO10 for 10% off your order at WSISports.com.
Cool. So with both of you being in marketing, and I share a lot of your social media when I'm on there, it seems like there's so many other things that this summer I've kind of been hit or miss out there, but there have been some issues that I've shared, and some of those are in correlation with SCI, which my listeners hear about a lot, Safari Club International, because I'm the regional representative for SCI for the state of Colorado. And so I'm on a lot of boards and committees with that organization, but also, as Brian knows, I've shared Sportsmen's Alliance for years because you guys are doing great things. And so with that, those issues that you're sharing out there, can you guys kind of give us an update of what's happening in the outdoor world?
Oh, boy. Well, we wrapped the first half of the session, and I think we're monitoring like 1,300 bills, something like that. We put out 350-ish alerts, from January 1 to mid-June. And most everybody's gone on recess now, so the legislative side has slowed down. New York pulled some dark and night tricks, and California is still pushing some crazy stuff out as usual. But what's been happening lately is, this summertime has been kind of more federal stuff. The Biden administration, you talk about the post with SCI and the funding for public schools, that's just popped up here in the last couple of weeks, and that's a big deal.
Yeah. And so that one, Brian, if we can just stop for a second on that, Naomi and I both are hunter education instructors. So I'm sure, Naomi, your heart probably leapt like mine did, because here in the area, I've taught in one of the schools in Ignacio, Colorado, and we teach in the schools in Pagosa Springs. And so can you give us a little background on that bill and exactly what it does?
Yeah, and just how it's impacted, like both you and me, Mia. And we got to remember too, here in Colorado, that we just passed last year that hunter education in the schools bill. So we thought, that was a big win, in that in Colorado, we were always going to be able to teach hunter education in our schools. So for Colorado, it definitely hits home.
Yeah, and it spawns out of last year's bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This is the gun control legislation. You'll see the Biden administration pat themselves on the back for red flag laws and mental health funding, which is, that's fine. But there was also funding for schools in there. And, there was a line that was written that said cannot be used, for training with deadly weapons. And that was to clarify that it's not to be used for resource officer training. That comes from a different funding mechanism. So they clarified that, and that's what that was all about. Well, the Biden Department of Education is reading that plain text, letter of the law, and saying, nope, if you're training a kid with a bow and arrow, that's a deadly weapon, not to be used. So the literal, by the letter interpretation of it, which is not what the bill sponsors or anybody intended to have happen, but it's something we see all the time. That's why a lot of times we get accused of, reading into bill. This is what it says in black and white, and it's up to the enforcement agency or agent, that if they want to be overzealous, it says it, and so that's what I'm saying, and hopefully we can get that fixed here pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where words matter, and that's something our legislators know, that words matter. And obviously we're seeing this negative consequence from that. But I'm also an archery in the schools instructor, and it's interesting to me because we talk about a deadly weapon, and archery is the safest sport in schools. And so it was kind of mind blowing to me, like, oh, okay, we're going to take away the safest sport. And like, one of the deadliest tools is a golf club. It's like, how do we correlate these? Because it's just the words, those words matter. So that one to me was pretty disappointing. I have been keeping an eye on that one and looking for your emails and checking those out to see where that's going, because it's definitely one thing that I hold near and dear to my heart. And it's so important to educate, and it's like, okay, if we want them to be safer, we need to educate them, but you want to take away education, and seemingly you're hoping they'll be safer. So it's definitely a big one. And I hope that my listeners will keep an eye on that also. I'll include links in the show notes to the Sportsmen's Alliance and to areas where you can keep an eye on this issue as well. So I'll let you continue on this long list of things that you may have. Sorry to interrupt you with that one.
No, I mean, that it is a big deal. I mean, NASP, National Archery in the Schools program, has a great stat that 91% of their participants go on to or want to go on to other outdoor endeavors, and here every state is spending millions on R3, and now we have the federal government shutting down one of the best funnels that we have. So, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so,
And that R3 is recruitment, retention, and reactivation. And that's helping people get outside into the outdoors. And so huge initiative, another one that I'll include a link for anybody who's interested in learning more about that.
yeah. And it's a congressional bill. So Congress is the ultimate fix. And so they're, you know, we're putting pressure on them. We have a petition that you can sign, and so we're going to push it forward and get, you can let your congressmen and senators know. We're also, as we did with SCI, we're looking at legal channels and going to file a notice of intent to sue to get this back. So that's a big one. You know, there's other federal issues that have been brewing for a while now. The lead ban, lead fishing and tackle, lead tackle and ammo ban on wildlife refuges, any future expansions. And that's one we've been talking about for a year or two now that the Biden administration has pushed, which, you know, when you want to talk about access and getting people outdoors and you keep making it more and more expensive, that becomes an issue, you know, and the alternatives to lead ammunition do get expensive. And there is a cost offset that people do that, like, hey, it's already hard enough to get started in hunting, with, you know, the learning curve, where to go, the intimidation, and all the gear. I mean, it's not a cheap thing to get started with. Another big issue.
And so with that, with the lead ammunition, I've followed that one pretty closely, but with the tackle, are there a lot of options there, or how is that working on the fishing side?
There's tungsten sinkers and, you know, different metals, but again, that's it. Fishing like that, you can lose a lot of tackle. A lot of you're using tungsten instead of a little BB shot, that could get expensive in a hurry. And then you start thinking about jig heads and everybody having to reconfigure if they're fishing a lot on the refuges. So that becomes an issue, and it's not a scientific issue. I mean, Todd, our VP of Government Affairs, testified in Congress and just pulled out one of the refuges and did a deep dive into their history, and there is literally zero. They even had it in writing that there's never been an issue with lead poisoning. Don't foresee a future of, you know, issue of lead poisoning, you know, of animals. And so it's literally just a political feather.
It's making it harder. Like Mia and I know that one thing that our new hunter education students really have to go through is, like you said, finding a way to do that. But then also everything is very intimidating already. All of the laws that you have to pay attention to already. And I find especially those ones that are location specific. So if you want to go to a refuge and that refuge has specific laws already, and putting this on top of it is just making it so much harder for people to really get into and use what should be our public lands.
Right. And in Colorado, we also had a lead ammunition bill passed that's kind of a study and a buyback. And I'm not sure really, it wasn't clear how that's going to work. Like, it's just, you know, okay, I'm this legislator who happens to be my legislator, and I'm just going to pass a bill so that I have this, you know, flag beside my name that I passed a bill. But to me, it seemed like a nothing bill. I mean, most of the people I know that, like you said, they need affordable ammunition, I don't think they're going to take the time to go figure out how or where to trade the ammunition in. And what I've also learned when I'm out and about is that they aren't even aware that this happened. They don't even know about it. So there is some marketing there there's a huge gap. So.
That bill was definitely a weird one. I remember it was super scary at first, but then there was some financial stuff that couldn't happen legally, and they wrote it weird and got it amended. And it really just goes to show that, like you said, they wanted this little flag, you know, some more. What it is gun control, you know. They just wanted to say, hey, I did this, and that's what we're fighting against. It's just not logical in any way, shape, or form.
Right. Yeah. So what else do we have, Brian? Are you having any more, or is that it? No, I know that it's not.
petition. Lucky you guys in Colorado. I've already got them here in Washington State. So we've got the wolf petition, and this is a battle the Sportsmen's Alliance has been fighting for almost 20 years now, like delisting wolves in the Great Lakes. We've delisted them 3 times. Judges have slapped them back on when the Humane Society and Center for Biological Diversity have brought lawsuits that are ticky-tacky, that like the argument has now shifted from population dynamics, oh, how many wolves are there, to, oh, well, if we hunt these wolves, what impact will it have on these other populations of wolves? And so it gets real legal mumbo jumbo and theoretical stuff. And that's why they got slapped back on. The judge said, you have to at least consider. It doesn't mean you have to do something. You have to consider remnant wolves in other states and other areas. And if this core population were to drop, what would that do to these? Historical range. They don't have to be everywhere, but you at least have to consider historical range, the suitable habitat within that historical range, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is something that's been going on. It's been like this chess game, right? We move a piece, they move a piece, we get a ruling, they appeal on something and move a pawn, and then we move. And so we've kind of started to finally got them backed into a corner. The wolves in the Great Lakes are booming, they're well over all recovery goals. Out here in the West, Washington, we're just about to fulfill the state Endangered Species Act requirements, the state level stuff. Oregon, then Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. So there's distinct populations. Great Lakes is one. The Rocky Mountain states, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana are one. Those are 2 recognized distinct population segments, and so Rocky Mountains are delisted. The Great Lakes have not been. So we've petitioned Fish and Wildlife to delist the Great Lakes states, and then to create a West Coast distinct population, which is Western Washington, Western Oregon, California. And then to create a remnant population DPS, which would be just about every other state. So you're talking Colorado, Utah, Nevada, if they were to move into there. And that this satisfies the courts. That allows management and hunting in the Great Lakes of wolves and in the Northern Rocky Mountains. And it allows the West Coast wolves to be managed as they need to be done. And then any future populations can still be protected and managed when they meet those appropriate thresholds. So it's a big one, but
the wolves is a huge one. And I've had a lot of people ask me a lot of questions. I've been on focus groups here in Colorado for our introduction. And one thing that I've been asked as a hunter, and really people put me in this little box as you're a hunter, but really ultimately I'm all about conservation and I want healthy wildlife populations. And they've asked me why I demonize wolves. And so do you think wolves are demonized? Or I look at the other side and I'm like, why do you pedestalize a wolf? So how do you see the wolves being, like, what are they in the whole big scheme of wildlife?
I think balance for their population dynamics, they can definitely be demonized in a lot of people's eyes, because if you look at, and this can all be found on our website too, if you're a nerd like me and want to look things up, if you look at the numbers of what they were supposed to be in, say, the UP of Michigan, they're supposed to have just over 100 and they have almost 700. So if you allow any population, not just wolves, to be that unbalanced, they're going to get into trouble and they're going to start creating issues with people. So of course they're going to like demonize them if they're eating their cattle, or if they're eating their dogs, or causing even family issues if they don't have the means to protect themselves, and if they don't have the means to manage that population. So I think that question comes back to, are they able to manage it or not? And that's what we're trying to do here, is give them the ability to manage their population. We're not trying to wipe them out. We're just trying to give them an outlet to make them know that these can be a managed species on the landscape. So yeah, I was just in the UP of Michigan, and we tried to run bears with dogs. And those poor houndsmen up there are dealing with wolves in a way that I know in Colorado we're going to have to here soon. So for those houndsmen in the UP of Michigan, I could see how they would demonize a wolf, but that's because they don't have the ability to manage them because they're under that Endangered Species Act. If they had the ability to manage them, it would be a completely different story. So that would be my answer.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that makes sense. And so I have a question. You brought up the numbers there in the Michigan area. In the Rocky Mountain states, you just said that they are able to manage them there, and they are actually triple their population goal as well. I think their goal was 1,100 and they're at 3,300 or something like that. And do you see in Idaho and the Montana, Wyoming, do they look at wolves differently? Like they're not seeing them as this horrible creature?
They do and they don't. Just from my experience, because they have the ability to manage problem wolves, they definitely see them differently than say the UP houndsmen do. But I'll let Brian speak more to that too.
Yeah, I'm right on the Idaho border. I mean, they're nature's perfect predator is how I look at it, and we manage everything else in the ecosystem. Here's the available habitat, suitable habitat, the prey base, predator base. Yet we aren't managing wolves. And so you're going to have problems and issues. And, if they look at them different, the Idaho numbers and the Montana numbers, Idaho has more wolves than all 3 states were supposed to have. They are nature's perfect predator. They are hard to kill. Like the only way to consistently do it is how they wiped them out the first time, with poison and aerial gunning. That's the only way. We won't be able to completely manage them with hunting. They're just they move too far, too fast. They're in the one drainage one day and they're 60, 80 miles, 100 miles away the next day, and they're smart, they're cooperative hunters. They smell, they're cautious. They are smart animals, and you aren't going to be able to kill them with a rifle. It's just, now and then you'll get a couple, but it's not a management tactic. It's a helpful management, piece. It's a piece of it. But to be able to consistently manage that population, you can't do. And if you've seen Idaho and Montana have liberalized their seasons, to allow up to a 90% take of the population, and that's the headline, right? Montana and Idaho are going to kill 90% of their wolves. They're not going to kill 90% of haven't been able to kill 90%. It's impossible. They're just opening that door so if they can kill some extras, they can, but they will never be able to kill 90% with recreational hunting or trapping. It just can't be done there. It's not feasible, so you want to be able to have that tool and be able to open that door to do so, but it'll never happen as far as on mass scale, and that's where people get frustrated is, like Naomi was talking about, you start seeing damage, whether that's to livestock or whether that's to wildlife in the ecosystem by wiping out, or knocking down ungulate herd numbers, elk and deer. And what we found here is it's starting to change the behavior of elk and deer. They're coming into the valleys. They're staying close to farms, which then increases your crop depredation issues.
Right. And that just makes my heart, my blood pressure just rose when you said that, because where I live is where the elk come down in the winter, and they live right here. And my cattle also live right here. So it's something that, as Naomi said, we'll be seeing that sooner than we'd like, I'm sure. And Brian, you mentioned trapping, and Naomi, I know you're a trapper. Have you done any studying as far as methods of take and how we would be able to trap wolves?
As far as, I've gone out on a trap line. I'm not a trapper at all, but I went out on a trap line with a wolf guy, and it was pretty interesting, but even that's difficult,
Yeah. And you see how anti-trapping organizations are right now, our reintroduction bill was written so that we could not reintroduce wolves with a foothold trap, which is just ridiculous. So I don't know how they're going to get them once they find a state to actually get them from, which is another kind of funny aspect. But so they wrote in our reintroduction that they have to be caught humanely and not with a foothold trap, which is silly. And if you you have listened to your podcast, I just heard Sky's podcast with you, and a foothold is a humane trap, and it's the reason we even have otters, like river otters, here in Colorado. So yeah, just bringing trapping into the equation, why we're getting this reintroduction and not just letting them happen naturally anyway. There's so much going on right now across the whole landscape that's just not logical. So I mean, we're not ever going to be able to foothold trap them here in Colorado. Who knows? I mean, I'd like to think eventually we'll get to be able to manage our wolf population. Thankfully, that is something that is still written in the Colorado reintroduction, is that once they hit a certain number, we are supposed to be able to manage them. And hopefully with this effort with Sportsmen's Alliance and the distinct population segments, once they hit a number, we will be able to actually delist them. So we can do what we're supposed to do as conservationists and hunters. So leg holes aren't going to be available everywhere. So that's going to be very interesting. We're pretty much, as I understand it, like Brian was talking to the people that are able to quote unquote manage the population, but how difficult that is. And the people in the Great Lakes region, they just want a chance to be able to try to manage the one wolf that is coming in every day and harassing their cattle, so it's a very broad topic.
Yeah, it's definitely a stressful topic for Coloradans right now, especially if you're on the hunting and agriculture side.
Yeah, I live pretty close to where they're already here in Walden. So I get a lot of questions about that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of action up there, that's for sure. So Brian, I'm sure you have another item on your list, but since we're talking about endangered species and trapping and that kind of stuff, does the Sportsmen's Alliance doing any work in respect to the prairie chicken and that listing, delisting stuff that's going on there?
No, we haven't got too much into that. There's a lot of stuff here in the outdoors to cover. And that kind of falls into kind of the same type of stuff with fisheries, in that there is a lot of variables in that equation, right? You got habitat, you got different views on things, and then it becomes a quagmire in some spots, and the Sportsmen's Alliance, we really focus on these court cases and legislation and stuff that are stopping hunting for ideological reasons, and limiting us or creating barriers. Kind of our default is, if a biologist says that it's a huntable population and there's surplus and it's a sustainable population and method that we can do, we're like, leave it in their hands. If they say it's not, okay, and that's kind of the boundary line we draw. So when you get into some of the species, prairie chicken, or even some of the Chinook runs here on the West Coast and stuff, it can get very, not just political, but there's so many different agencies and so many different views on how to do it, that it's not a clear-cut issue. And so we're like, that gets difficult. So we haven't paid in a lot on that.
It has to kind of get more of a focus going right now. That's just kind of all over the place, I think, huh? And it sounds like to me, you guys are very much a North American model focused, where one of those pillars is let's manage based on science, not on emotion. So yeah, that's probably why I always appreciate following your stuff.
I mean, that's kind of like, yeah, we protect hunting, fishing, trapping. That's what we always say, but really we're protecting the model. And those things fund the model, because you take away hunting, you're taking away a large chunk of, not just balancing the ecosystem, but the funding of the model, so that's really what we do a lot of, and that's what we're here to do, is to protect the model and those mechanisms, which we are seeing them dismantled right before our eyes.
Especially, we were wondering if we were going to get into this between Washington and Colorado, because it seems like a lot of our commission members are kind of trying to chip away at that North American wildlife model and see if they can't throw a different agenda in through the commission level, which is really scary and something that we always have to keep our eye on.
Right. And since you brought that up, Naomi, and Brian, since you're from Washington, I haven't talked about the Washington Commission on the podcast yet. If you guys want to kind of fill us in, just let us know, like, what Naomi just referred to. What does she mean if Colorado is being like Washington or headed that way?
Yeah, so I'll leave it to Brian here in a second to talk about Washington, but I don't know if you've looked at our latest appointees here in Colorado and the fact that our director's from Washington. So pretty much Brian and I have been talking back and forth about, yeah, it kind of has started in Washington and I'm seeing a lot of parallels here. So it's kind of giving us a little peek through the door of what we could see possibly happening here in Colorado, and it's not good.
Yeah, no, you guys were welcome. You took Dan, what's his name, your guys' head?
Dave.
It was Dan, now it's Dave, yeah.
You got him from Washington, and he was our conservation guy in Washington State. And yeah, Washington is a mess. This is like nightmare scenario. We are in trouble. They are dismantling the North American model, and they're not even hiding it anymore. Just this last weekend, last Thursday, there was a commission meeting, and one of the commissioners, who is from a protectionist group, she has a law degree, she works with saving beaver, she put forward a blue paper to end beaver trapping, and she literally said hunters should be worried. We're changing this. Point blank in the meeting. You should be nervous. We are changing this. And so Washington is unlike a lot of states, even back east, real blue states, New Jersey, New York, etc., Massachusetts. Commissioners have to have some threshold to serve. You know, they have to have a license, a hunting license for 5 out of 10 years or something along those lines. Have to be nominated by a sportsman's group. Washington, it's whatever the governor wants. He just puts whoever he wants to in there, and then they have a confirmation process, but they don't even have to be confirmed to serve. They've been confirmed for like 3 years, you know, so they just get to do whatever they want. So now we have, it's a 9-member commission, and at least probably 7 of them are anti-hunting and have served on wildlife protection groups. We sued one of them, Lorna Smith, for holding dual positions, but they are moving at lightning speed. They ended the spring bear hunt. Everybody saw that. Now they're talking about separating out bear and mountain lion hunting in the falls and making those different regulations and rules, and talking about changing our elk seasons to a permit only system. No over the counter, no open seasons, you know, general seasons. They are moving at lightning speed, and they're not even apologizing, and they're going for it. And if you kind of look at Colorado and what's happening, it's the same thing you're seeing there. You're getting these protectionist groups and animal rights groups appointed to the commission level. And this is something we fought back east for years to protect, those standards. But out here in a couple of states, we don't have that. So they're getting in control of it, and they're pushing it, and they're very smart and very good. And it sounds great to the general public. You know, they start talking climate change and biodiversity and this and that. And this is why we have to stop bear hunting to save biodiversity. And it's like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? You know, but that's where it sounds great and it plays well in the newspapers.
Yeah,
Right.
like, okay.
Go ahead, Naomi.
I was just going to give an example, like here in Colorado, before we had our most recent appointees this past couple months ago, there was a petition to ban bobcat hunting at the commission level. Thankfully, we got that shut down, but then talking about what Brian just said, what things sound like to the general public versus what they sound like to us. Like here in Colorado, I always pull out this example. We don't have a limit on how many bobcats we can kill per season. Well, if you start looking into the logics of that and talk to the actual predator manager of the state and the wildlife researchers, it's because we don't have enough hunters that hunt bobcats in Colorado for that to ever really matter, one, and two, we want them to hunt as many bobcats as they can because of our population dynamics. There's just, bobcats are kind of like wolves, if you want to make that relation. There's just no way that hunters can ever make a big enough dent in that population to pull that population back. So that's the why we don't have bag limits for bobcats here in Colorado. But a commissioner that's still on the commission and was a lawyer for one of those anti-hunting lobbying groups, he will just slide in, I don't understand why we don't have bag limits on bobcats. That needs to happen. Well, for a member of the general public, they're like, wait, you can hunt and kill as many as you want? Of course we need bag limits. So they're doing these things in very smart ways that speak to the general population. And we are trying to get out there as hunters and conservationists saying, hey, like, we are following the North American wildlife model, and this is all science-based. It's not just, we want to kill as many bobcats as we can. So that's just one example of how things can look very different, even in the brochure, right there, bag limit, unlimited. Well, there's a reason for those things, and that's what we're fighting. And it's not easy, especially with a commission that doesn't want a single bobcat killed by a hunter.
Right. And so I know you and I both have showed up to those commission meetings and then to testify for the bill that would have banned bobcat, mountain lion, and lynx hunting. We showed up for that. In other states, like in Washington, Brian, are the sportsmen showing up, and are they being heard, or are they showing up and it's deaf ears they're talking to?
Yeah, so it's been great to see people get activated. When that spring bear hunt ban took place, or didn't pass technically, that really lit people up, and people are staying engaged, which is awesome. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter. Like, just last week, the number of calls for one of the petitions, or one of the questions that they had, it was like 350 anti-hunters called in or emailed in, and it was like 1,900 hunters did, in support or against it, whatever it was. They don't care. They just keep talking. They just, when it fits their agenda, they say, oh, the majority of people feel this way. When it doesn't fit their agenda, they just don't even acknowledge it. They just keep talking and say, well, I know a lot of people. I've literally seen them in commission meetings read off cue cards, read from the Humane Society of the United States on bear. Oh, bears are very slow when they come out of hibernation. And it's unethical. And they literally read what Humane Society had written for them. That's where we're at in Washington.
And they're being paid too, is the piece that I think a lot of the general public doesn't know also,
Right.
that these are paid testimonies versus you and I going and actually fighting for our livelihood. They're being paid just to read off cue cards. And what I think, though, it is important and it does matter. And I just, since I've gotten involved, I'm seeing a big movement happen. And I might be speaking a little hopeful, but I think we do make a difference. And I think we're going to learn how to make more of a difference, because they just can't get their way forever, and they can't keep doing this. And I think it's all part of a cycle, and the people that know the science are going to be the ones to fall back on eventually, because there is no way that the anti-hunting is going to be good for population dynamics at all. And I think you're going to start seeing more like California and their lions. Well, as soon as people start realizing how their lions are actually killed, because it's not by hunters anymore, it's by government officials. And once that sort of stuff starts getting bigger and more in the limelight, I'm hoping it doesn't go that far, but we just got to keep being loud and turning more and more heads. And that's all I can think of to do, but we're definitely doing it.
Yeah. And so thinking of that, Brian, did you have something to add to that?
I was gonna say, I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I'm the old jaded guy who's been around for a while now. I'm like, see what's going on here in Washington and what will be happening in Colorado. Because your guys' head guy, he was our conservation guy, and his brainchild with Barbara Baker, one of the commissioners, is a conservation plan. And this is what they're pushing through right now, and they hope to adopt by the end of October, just filled with protectionist ideological pieces that you could pretty much put anything under, and so they're moving and they're putting pieces in play. And I mean, it hasn't changed anything in California. The lions are being killed, they're stacked up for necropsies. The people in the cities don't care because they don't have to deal with it. Denver doesn't have to deal with it. Boulder doesn't deal with it. It's the people on the fringe that are in that interface that have to deal with it. There just aren't enough of them. And so that, this is where you go back to the very founding of our country with, population versus area, discussions and how do you weigh this politically type stuff. And it's getting to the point, especially here in Washington, where the governor just weighed in on the wolf thing and is having a public spat with the head of our Fish and Wildlife and said, you don't need to be putting your thumb on the scale before we even present the science. I don't know how much longer he'll be around for doing that. But the governor's against us. The legislature's walks in lockstep with them. The commission is all appointed for them. There is no other recourse right now in Washington other than the courts. Suing. The only.
And that's where you guys come in, because your main focus is at that point you're engaging. And do you see you guys are winning a majority of these, or how are these going?
Well, it depends which cases we're involved in. Oh, geez. 2, 3, 4, I don't know, like 4 or 5 federal cases. We sued Lorna Smith, one of the game commissioners here in Washington. We're in a state gun control issue down in California that we sued over. So, it kind of depends. We won the Lorna Smith ruling that she was serving on 2 different commissions at the same time, which is a conflict of interest, everything else. So she resigned the other commission so she can stay on the game.
Yeah.
Interesting there, and this is how deep the state, the governor is invested in this. We sued her personally. The governor and the attorney general elected to represent her and spent taxpayer money representing her when they didn't need to. And so that's how vested they are in keeping her around and making game policy for hunters. And this
yeah, and I always said I came up with this argument to the question, why do you hunt, a long time ago. And I was like, it's not only something that is fulfilling and what everybody says all the time, I love waking up and doing this. It's like, if we don't create the next generation of hunters, we're going to lose people. Like the federal trappers that we have right now are going to retire, and then who's going to be left to government hunt,
Right.
And why I got into wildlife conservation, sadly, is a lot because I saw kind of things like this changing. And why I decided to go back to school was originally why I went back to school was because I was afraid that if I did not become a government hunter, I wasn't going to be able to run my dogs. So I thought, I got to get this degree under my belt and I got to get name recognition, and simply because I want to do what I love to do. So that's a whole nother side of it. And I know Brian's right next to Idaho. I'm right next to Wyoming. We're both ready to just jump ship at some point. But there are other outlets, and I encourage people, especially young people and people that are still in school, to pursue them. Is we are going to need what we call government hunters. We're going to need wildlife researchers. I just talked to one at the Trappers Convention that had never trapped a bobcat in his life, but he's performing a research study on bobcats. Who's he talking to? He's talking to the Trappers Association because he doesn't know how to catch a bobcat. And if there's no young people in the Trappers Association, it's just this snowball that I don't think a lot of people think about with the education gap that we're not going to have. No one in Colorado knows how to foothold trap. You know, this entire generation doesn't. And this researcher is like, I have this tool that I can use under research, and he doesn't have anybody to trap for him. So that's like, I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but something that a lot of people don't recognize that we're going to lose. And I don't know when that's going to come around to, for everybody to see the light. But houndsmen, the same way. You're doing a lion research study and you don't have any houndsmen left. Good luck.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of hard work going on in Washington, and we're trying to get it here in Colorado to kind of start playing the game back. And that's why I like Sportsmen's Alliance so much, and why I became invested, is we can't just be on the defense all the time. We got to go on the offense sometimes also. So putting protections in place to make sure we don't lose things like we thought we did with the hunter education bill here in Colorado. We just got to keep going.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that that is a tangent, Naomi, because it is something that is very real, and in not just in the hunting community, but in the agriculture communities, it's something that we've been talking about, because the wolves basically in Montana, CSU took a bunch of cattlemen up to Montana to tour up there and see how ranchers live in harmony with wolves. And you can listen to past episodes to learn more about that, but that was quite a journey. But it is the government management that is happening, even though they have, expanded their hunting opportunities in Montana, less than 1% of hunters are successful. And so it's the government people that are actually killing the wolves. And like you had mentioned, helicopter hunting and stuff like that. And I mean, I don't even call that hunting with that. They're going in and taking out the nuisance packs. So it is something for if there's somebody who's looking for a way to find out what they want to do after high school. If you want to go to college, it's a career that is going to be a big one in the future. So thank you for bringing it up, Naomi. And Brian, we've talked about so many topics already so far, and I know that you guys have a ton more. For our listeners, would you just let people know, like, where can they find all the information, and what can we do to help support Sportsmen's Alliance?
Yeah, so you can follow us on social media and watch what Naomi's putting up there. That's we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, pretty much. I think you did Threads now. I don't know. I'm middle-aged. I don't know what the things are anymore, and I'm trying to disconnect from that. But if you go to sportsmensalliance.org, and that's MENS, sportsmensalliance.org, we have, all the latest news is up there right on the front page. If you go to our Legislative Action Center, which is at the top there, it's a drop-down button. There's an interactive map. We got a new tool in this, last January or so, that it's an interactive map. Click on your state. It'll bring up all the active bills in your state and we cipher it down to hunting, fishing, trapping, Fish and Game Commission, and sporting dogs. And so you can cipher down between those and look at them. We have action alerts in there like, okay, we need your voice now into these people. And that's where you get your one-click advocacy type stuff. You can click it, pre-made email, you can edit it as you want, but then it'll be sent to the appropriate committee members or whatever. Not every bill or every alert has those. We're pretty strategic about it. Some groups will just blast everybody with everything. And that's what I wanted to do when I first got into this type of stuff. But over the last 9-10 years, I've learned like, oh, it's a chess game and there's things going on behind the scenes and there's discussions taking place, and always, being a writer and somebody who's been on the editorial side, I just like to give somebody a public lashing. And the government affairs, they're like, no, that's not how this is done. This is how we're going to move this. Oh, okay. So we're very strategic about which ones have alerts and put pressure, at appropriate times. But yeah, if you go to the website, we have the interactive map, we have the action alerts. There's all the contact information for all of your representatives from the, state level up to the federal level. Just follow memberships. It starts at $35 and goes up, from there with different benefits. If you're an outdoor company, you can join as a business member, and there's perks there with advertising in the magazine that comes out quarterly, and social media and newsletters, things like that. Plus it's a write-off, because you're protecting your business. So there's about any way you want to get involved, you can get involved, whether that's just following us on social and sharing that stuff, or joining as a member and supporting us.
Yeah. And so Naomi, as far as social goes, as I said, I share stuff when it comes across my feed that I think is super important and stuff like that. Are there any hashtags or anything we should be doing on social media to kind of work with you?
Yeah, for sure. Our big one is Huntervationist, and I almost threw it in earlier, talking about how we're hunters and conservationists, kind of combine the two, Huntervationist. That really shows even the people that don't know what we're about, what a hunter really is, to us. So Huntervationist, and I Am the Alliance is for when you get involved. Hashtag I Am the Alliance shows that, you're really getting out there and supporting the sportsmen's community, with us. So those are the two big ones. And as always, pass on your passion, protect your passion. Just anything that you could think that a Huntervationist really is about, we use the hashtag, but hashtag Huntervationist is huge.
Very cool. Well, I will include links to the sportsmensalliance.org and to the social media sites and all of that. I hope for the listeners, if you have additional questions, go ahead and check out the website, do some research. There's contact information there as well. You can also email me. My email address is contact@miaanstine.com, and you can direct message me on social media outlets and so forth. And I do appreciate both of you and the topics that we visited about today. We may in the future, if you guys are interested, join for another visit. Since there is so much, we could take hours of time, but sometimes we don't want to do all of that in one go. So I would love to have you on again if you guys are available.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. It's great being here.
Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.